Introduction: The Man Who Shaped a Century. Deep beneath the crumbling streets of Berlin, in a dimly lit bunker, a man who once declared, "I go the way that Providence dictates," with the assurance of a sleepwalker, now faced the end of his path. The date was April 30th, 1945. Adolf Hitler, the Führer of Nazi Germany, sat with a pistol in one hand and a cyanide capsule in the other. Outside, the relentless thunder of Soviet artillery shook the walls, signaling the collapse of his so-called thousand-year Reich. In that moment, as he prepared to take his own life, the world stood at a crossroads. His dreams of domination were crumbling, but the shadow of his actions would stretch far beyond that bunker. But what if history had unfolded differently? What if Hitler had never ascended to power, or what if he had emerged victorious in the war he unleashed? These questions are not mere speculation. They are keys to unlocking the mind of the man whose life reshaped the 20th century in ways both catastrophic and profound. Welcome to Adolf Hitler, the life that shaped a century. Over the next few hours, we'll embark on an unflinching journey through the arc of Hitler's life, from his quiet birth in a small Austrian town in 1889 to his dramatic death in that Berlin bunker in 1945. We'll explore the forces that molded him, the poverty and rejection of his early years, the radical ideas that fueled his rise, and the unshakable belief in his own destiny that drove him to power. We'll dissect the decisions that turned him into the architect of unimaginable atrocities, the Holocaust, the devastation of World War II, and the ruin of nations. But this isn't just a biography. We'll dive into the mysteries and theories that still swirl around his name. Did Hitler have a secret plan to escape justice in his final days? Could the Allies have stopped him before his war machine consumed Europe? What if he had never been born at all? These what-if scenarios don't just tease the imagination, they challenge us to rethink the fragile threads of history. And as we unravel his story, we'll confront his legacy, a dark stain that lingers in our world today. As historian Ian Kershaw writes in Hitler, a biography, Hitler was the outcome of a profound crisis in German society and of the specific circumstances of his time. His rise wasn't inevitable, it was a collision of chaos, charisma, and catastrophe. Understanding his life isn't just about looking back, it's about recognizing the dangers of unchecked power, the seductive pull of demagoguery, and the thin line that separates peace from destruction. That's why this audiobook matters, and that's why we're inviting you to join us on this journey. Here's what you can expect. We'll trace every chapter of Hitler's life, from his troubled childhood to his fiery speeches that mesmerized millions, to the chilling strategies that led to genocide and global war. Along the way, we'll pause to ponder the questions that historians and armchair theorists alike still debate. What do you think would have happened if Hitler had made different choices? Share your own theories in the comments below. We'd love to hear them. In Chapter 1, we'll start at the very beginning, Hitler's childhood in Austria. What early experiences shaped the man who would become one of history's most infamous figures? Stay tuned to find out. So, if you're ready to dive into one of the most tumultuous lives ever lived, hit that subscribe button and let's get started. This is Adolf Hitler, the life that shaped a century, a story of ambition, destruction, and the haunting echoes that still resonate today. Let's uncover the truth together. Chapter 1: The Making of a Dictator, Hitler's Early Life and Influences, 1889 to 1918. Picture a small, sleepy town on the border of Austria and Germany. It's April 20th, 1889, and in a modest inn, a child is born, a child whose name would one day echo through history as a symbol of tyranny and terror. Adolf Hitler. But how does a boy from a quiet village become the architect of one of humanity's darkest chapters? Could a single twist of fate, like acceptance into an art school, have stopped his rise? Welcome to Chapter 1 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, where we uncover the roots of a dictator. Let's dive into the story and ask, what shaped this man, and what might have changed his path? Adolf Hitler's story begins in Braunau am Inn, a quaint Austrian town along the Inn River. His father, Alois Hitler, was a stern customs official with a temper as sharp as his mustache. Born out of wedlock and later legitimized, Alois carried a chip on his shoulder, and he ruled the household with an iron fist. Adolf's mother, Clara, was the opposite, gentle, loving, and fiercely protective of her fragile son, who'd lost 3 siblings to illness before he was even born. This contrast set the stage for a childhood of tension and turmoil. By all accounts, young Adolf was a bright but rebellious kid. He clashed constantly with Alois, who dreamed of his son following him into the civil service. But Adolf had other ideas. He fancied himself an artist, sketching buildings and landscapes with a talent that, while not masterful, showed promise. At school in Linz, he was a mediocre student, lazy, prone to daydreaming, and quick to argue with teachers who didn't see his potential. Then came 1903. Alois died suddenly of a lung hemorrhage, leaving 13-year-old Adolf free from his father's shadow, but not for long. 4 years later, in 1907, tragedy struck again. Clara, the anchor of his world, fell ill with breast cancer. Her death at 47 devastated Adolf. He'd later call it the most crushing blow of his life. As Ian Kershaw notes in Hitler, 1889 to 1936 Hubris, her passing left him unmoored, a young man with no direction, nursing a growing resentment against the world. Now 18, orphaned and rudderless, Hitler set his sights on Vienna, the glittering capital of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. He arrived in 1908 with a suitcase, a few sketches, and a burning ambition to join the prestigious Academy of Fine Arts. But fate had other plans. The Academy rejected him twice. The first time, they dismissed his portfolio as lacking in human figures. The second, they didn't even let him take the entrance exam. Crushed, Hitler retreated into Vienna's underbelly, drifting between cheap hostels and odd jobs, painting postcards, shoveling snow, anything to scrape by. Vienna in the early 1900s was a cauldron of ideas, beauty, and bitterness. It was a city of grand opera houses and squalid slums, where intellectuals debated socialism and nationalism while anti-Semitic pamphlets littered the streets. Here, Hitler's worldview began to harden. He soaked up the rants of figures like Karl Lueger, Vienna's populist mayor, who blamed Jews for the city's woes. Was this where Hitler's hatred took root? Historian Alan Bullock argues yes in Hitler, a study in tyranny, suggesting Vienna planted the seeds of his antisemitism. Others, like Kershaw, say it crystallized later, fueled by war and defeat. What do you think? Could a city alone turn a dreamer into a demagogue? Let's pause for a what if. What if Hitler had been accepted into that art school? Imagine him thriving in Vienna's bohemian circles, channeling his intensity into canvas instead of conquest. Could a life of paintbrushes have spared the world his swastikas? It's a tantalizing thought. Bullock speculates that rejection fueled his rage, turning a bruised ego into a weapon. But perhaps his path was already set. Resentment doesn't need a rejection letter to fester. By 1913, Hitler was 24, broke, and tired of Vienna's grind. He fled to Munich, dodging Austria's draft and chasing a fresh start. Munich welcomed him with its beer halls and Bavarian charm, but war loomed on the horizon. When World War I erupted in 1914, Hitler saw his chance. He volunteered for the German army, not Austria's, a telling choice, and found purpose in the trenches. As a dispatch runner in the Bavarian Reserve Infantry Regiment 16, Hitler wasn't a hero, but he wasn't a coward either. He dodged bullets, delivered messages under fire, and earned an Iron Cross, second class, in 1914, followed by a first class in 1918, a rare honor for a corporal. War gave him what Vienna couldn't: belonging, discipline, and a front-row seat to chaos. But it also fed his fury. Germany's surrender in November 1918 hit him like a betrayal. Lying in a hospital bed, blinded by a gas attack, he wept, not just for his eyes, but for a nation he felt had been stabbed in the back. That's where Chapter 1 ends. Hitler at 29, a decorated veteran with no home, no family, and a head full of grievances. The war was over, but his battle was just beginning. How would this aimless drifter become the Führer? Could his rage have been redirected, or was the world already on a collision course with his destiny? Stick around for Chapter 2, where a failed rebellion sparks his rise. And let me know in the comments, do you think Vienna made Hitler, or was he always destined for darkness? Chapter 2, From Artist to Politician, Post-World War I Germany and the Birth of the Nazi Party, 1919 to 1923. November 11, 1918. The guns of World War I fall silent, and Germany lies in ruins, defeated, humiliated, and teetering on the edge of chaos. In a hospital bed, a 29-year-old Adolf Hitler blinks through tears and rage, his eyes still stinging from a gas attack. The Kaiser has fled, the empire is dead, and a fragile democracy struggles to rise from the ashes. But for Hitler, this isn't the end, it's the beginning. Welcome to Chapter 2 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook. Here, we'll trace how a broken soldier morphed into a political firebrand, igniting the spark of the Nazi Party. And here's a question to chew on: what if his first grab for power, a reckless coup in 1923, had actually worked? Could history have taken an even darker turn a decade earlier? Let's dive into the chaos of post-war Germany and find out. Germany in 1919 was a nation on its knees. The Treaty of Versailles, signed in June that year, was less a peace deal and more a chokehold. It stripped Germany of 13% of its land, 10% of its population, and all its colonies. The Rhineland was demilitarized, its army slashed to 100,000 men, and the navy gutted. Worst of all, the war guilt clause pinned the entire conflict on Germany, demanding reparations that would eventually total 132 billion gold marks, billions more in today's money. Hyperinflation was already creeping in, turning savings into kindling and bread into a luxury. In Berlin, Munich, and beyond, people starved while politicians bickered. The Weimar Republic, Germany's newborn democracy, was frail from the start, mocked as a government of November criminals who'd signed the surrender. Hitler felt this betrayal in his bones. Still in the army, he was stationed in Munich, a city simmering with unrest. Bavaria, with its proud traditions and Catholic roots, chafed under Berlin's rule. In early 1919, a short-lived communist uprising, the Bavarian Soviet Republic, had seized power, only to be crushed by right-wing militias called Freikorps. Blood stained the cobblestones, and Munich became a breeding ground for extremists. Hitler, now a low-ranking intelligence agent, was tasked with spying on political groups to root out radicals. It was a mundane job for a man who'd once dreamed of painting masterpieces, but it would change everything. On September 12, 1919, Hitler walked into a dimly lit beer hall, the Sterneckebräu, to monitor a meeting of the German Workers' Party, or DAP. The group was tiny, fewer than 60 members, founded by a locksmith named Anton Drexler and a journalist, Karl Harrer. They were nationalists, antisemites, and fiercely anti-communist, railing against the Versailles Treaty and the Jewish Bolsheviks they blamed for Germany's woes. Hitler sat quietly at first, notebook in hand, listening as a speaker droned on about separating Bavaria from Germany. Then something snapped. He stood, interrupted, and unleashed a tirade, passionate, unscripted, and electrifying. The room fell silent. Drexler, wide-eyed, whispered to a colleague, "Good God, he's got the gift of the gab. We could use him." Days later, a postcard arrived at Hitler's barracks. It was an invitation to join the DAP as member number 55, though Hitler later claimed he was the 7th, a lie to inflate his importance. He accepted, not out of ideology, but opportunity. As William L. Shirer writes in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, Hitler saw in this obscure sect a chance to climb out of anonymity. The army let him stay on payroll while he moonlighted as a propagandist, a cushy gig for a man with no real prospects. Hitler threw himself into the DAP with a zeal that stunned its founders. He wasn't just a member, he was a force. His speeches, raw, angry, and hypnotic, drew crowds. He'd pace the stage, jabbing the air, his voice rising from a growl to a roar. He blamed Germany's collapse on a conspiracy of Jews, communists, and weak politicians, tapping into a vein of resentment that ran deep. Within months, attendance at DAP meetings swelled from dozens to hundreds. Hitler pushed for a name change to something bolder, the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or NSDAP, Nazis, for short. The term socialist was a ploy to lure working-class support, though the party's core was fiercely anti-leftist. By 1920, Hitler was the party's propaganda chief, a role he was born to play. He designed the Nazi flag, a black swastika on a white circle, set against blood red, symbolizing racial purity and struggle. He co-authored the party's 25-point program, a mix of nationalism, antisemitism, and vague economic promises like land reform and profit sharing. Point 4 read, "Only members of the nation may be citizens, no Jew may be a member of the nation." It was a manifesto dripping with hate, yet cloaked in populist appeal. Meetings moved from backrooms to packed halls like the Hofbrauhaus, where Hitler's rants drowned out the clink of beer mugs. But who was this Hitler now? No longer the scruffy artist of Vienna, he traded his paintbrush for a podium. He wore a trench coat and a grim expression, his mustache trimmed to a severe rectangle. He lived simply, rented rooms, no family, no vices beyond his temper. Friends were few, admirers were many. His power wasn't in charm but in conviction. As Shirer notes, he spoke not to reason, but to the gut. And Germany's gut was growling. The early 1920s were a pressure cooker. Inflation spiraled out of control. By 1923, a loaf of bread cost billions of marks. Workers hauled wheelbarrows of cash just to buy groceries. The French occupied the Ruhr Valley to extract unpaid reparations, sparking strikes and sabotage. In Munich, right-wing groups flourished, veterans, monarchists, and misfits itching for a fight. Hitler saw his moment. He quit the army in 1920 to focus on the Nazis full-time, seizing control from Drexler in 1921 after a power struggle. The party was his now, and he dreamed bigger than beer halls. Enter the Sturmabteilung, the SA, or brown shirts. Formed in 1921, this paramilitary wing was Hitler's muscle, thugs in tan uniforms who broke up rival meetings and intimidated dissenters. Led by Ernst Röhm, a scarred war veteran with a taste for violence, the SA gave the Nazis street cred. They clashed with communists in bloody brawls, turning politics into warfare. By 1923, the Nazis had thousands of members, and Hitler's name was buzzing beyond Bavaria. Then came the crisis of 1923. Germany defaulted on reparations, and France tightened its grip on the Ruhr. Inflation hit absurd heights. A dollar bought 4 trillion marks by November. The Weimar government floundered, and in Munich, Gustav von Kahr, Bavaria's conservative leader, flirted with rebellion against Berlin. Hitler smelled blood. He allied with General Erich Ludendorff, a World War I hero turned nationalist icon, and hatched a plan, a coup to topple Bavaria's government, then march on Berlin to overthrow the Republic. It was audacious, reckless, and doomed. November 8, 1923. The Bürgerbräukeller, a massive beer hall in Munich, buzzed with 3,000 people. Von Kahr was speaking when Hitler burst in, flanked by SA men with guns. He fired a pistol into the ceiling and shouted, "The national revolution has begun." He declared martial law, claiming von Kahr and his allies supported him. They didn't. For a moment, it worked, cheers erupted, and Hitler basked in the chaos. He locked von Kahr in a side room, strong-arming him into compliance, while Ludendorff rallied the crowd. But it was a bluff built on sand. Outside, the putsch unraveled. Von Kahr slipped away and called in the army. The next day, November 9th, Hitler led 2,000 Nazis and supporters through Munich streets, aiming for the city center. At the Odeonsplatz, police blocked their path. Shots rang out, 16 Nazis and 4 policemen fell. Hitler, linked arm in arm with a comrade, hit the ground as his shoulder dislocated. Ludendorff marched on defiantly but was arrested. The Munich Putsch, or Beer Hall Putsch, collapsed in hours. Hitler fled, hiding in a friend's attic until police dragged him out 2 days later. So, what if it had succeeded? Let's explore that. Imagine Hitler and Ludendorff taking Munich, rallying Bavaria's right-wing factions, and marching north. The Weimar Republic, already crumbling, might have folded. As Richard J. Evans suggests in The Coming of the Third Reich, a successful putsch could have installed a nationalist dictatorship a decade early. No Great Depression needed, just raw momentum. Germany might have rearmed sooner, clashing with France over the Ruhr by the mid-1920s. But here's the catch: Hitler's party was still small, his plans half-baked. Could he have held power without the economic despair of 1929? Or would infighting, like with Rome's SA, have torn it apart? It's a chilling what-if, a Third Reich born premature, perhaps weaker, perhaps deadlier. Back to reality. The putsch failed, and Hitler faced trial in 1924. But even in defeat, he won. The courtroom became his stage. He ranted for hours, blaming Jews and traitors for Germany's plight, turning a treason charge into a propaganda coup. Newspapers splashed his name nationwide. Sentenced to 5 years, he'd served less than 1, a slap on the wrist that stunned his foes. As Shirer puts it, the putsch made Hitler a martyr and a household name. That's Chapter 2, a drifter turned demagogue, a flop turned fame. From the ashes of war, Hitler forged a movement, and from a botched coup, he gained a spotlight. Next time, in Chapter 3, we'll enter Landsberg prison, where a jail cell births Mein Kampf and a new Hitler emerges. But for now, ponder this: was the putsch his biggest mistake, or his greatest gift? Drop your thoughts below, and let's keep unraveling this twisted tale. Chapter 3, Prison and Mein Kampf, Hitler's Time in Landsberg, 1923 to 1924. November 11th, 1923. Munich streets are quiet again, but the echoes of gunfire still linger. The beer hall putsch has collapsed, and Adolf Hitler, once a rising star in Germany's radical fringe, sits in a cell, his shoulder bruised, his dreams of revolution in tatters. He's 34 years old, facing charges of high treason, and staring at a future that could end behind bars, or worse. But what if this failure, this moment of disgrace, wasn't the end? What if it was the crucible that forged his destiny? Welcome to Chapter 3 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook. Today, we'll step into Landsberg prison, where a defeated agitator transforms into a prophet of hate, penning a book that would shake the world, Mein Kampf. And here's a question to ponder: what if that book had never reached the masses? Could history have dodged a bullet? Let's find out. The Munich Putsch had been a disaster. Hitler's bold gamble to seize Bavaria and march on Berlin had crumbled in less than 24 hours, leaving 16 Nazis and 4 policemen dead in the streets. He'd fled the scene, hiding in the attic of a supporter, Hafstengel, until police tracked him down on November 11th. Disheveled, exhausted, and nursing a dislocated shoulder from the chaos at Odeonsplatz, he was arrested and hauled off to face justice. The Weimar Republic, battered but still standing, aimed to make an example of him. High treason carried a possible death sentence, or at least a long stretch in prison. For a man who'd spent years drifting, preaching, and plotting, it looked like the end of the road. But Germany in 1923 was a land of contradictions. The Weimar government was weak, its courts lenient toward right-wing extremists, especially in conservative Bavaria. Hitler's trial began on February 26, 1924, in Munich's People's Court, a grand, wood-paneled room packed with reporters, supporters, and curious onlookers. He wasn't just a defendant, he was a performer. Dressed in a dark suit, his hair slicked back, he turned the dock into a soapbox. Over days of testimony, he didn't deny the putsch, he embraced it. "I alone bear the responsibility," he declared, his voice steady, his eyes blazing. "But I am not a criminal. If today I stand here as a revolutionary, it is as a revolutionary against the revolution of 1918. He railed against the November criminals who'd surrendered in World War I, the Jews he blamed for Germany's woes, and the Versailles Treaty that had enslaved the nation. It was a masterstroke. The judges, sympathetic to nationalist causes, let him ramble, sometimes for hours. The press ate it up. Headlines blared his defiance across Germany, turning a failed coup into a national spectacle. As William L. Shirer writes in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, the trial gave Hitler a platform he could never have dreamed of. Instead of a traitor, he emerged a martyr, a folk hero to the disgruntled, the desperate, and the vengeful. On April 1, 1924, exactly 101 years before today's date, the verdict came down. Guilty of high treason. The sentence? 5 years in Landsberg prison, a fortress-like facility 40 miles west of Munich. But here's the twist: 5 years was the minimum, and the court added a wink and a nod, eligibility for parole in just 6 months. No death penalty, no hard labor. It was a slap on the wrist that stunned the government's critics. General Ludendorff, his co-conspirator, walked free entirely. The message was clear: in Bavaria, rebellion against Weimar wasn't such a crime if your heart was patriotic. Landsberg wasn't a dungeon, it was more like a retreat. Built in 1910, the prison housed political prisoners in relative comfort. Hitler's cell, number 7, was a spacious room with a high window, a bed, a desk, and even a view of the Lech River Valley. He could receive visitors, read newspapers, and write to his heart's content. The guards treated him like a VIP. Some were Nazi sympathizers who saluted him in secret. As Ian Kershaw notes in Hitler, 1889–1936 Hubris, Landsberg was less a punishment than a sabbatical. Over the next 9 months, Hitler would get 330 visitors, party loyalists, admirers, even curious locals dropping off gifts like sausages and beer. At first, he sulked. The putsch's failure gnawed at him. He refused food for days, brooding over what might have been. Rudolf Hess, a devoted follower jailed nearby, later claimed Hitler contemplated suicide, though that's debated. But soon, his mood shifted. Prison gave him something he'd never had: time. Time to reflect, to scheme, and to write. The Nazi Party was banned, its leaders scattered, but Hitler saw a chance to regroup, not with guns, but with words. It started with a typewriter. In June 1924, he began dictating to Hess and Emil Maurice, a burly SA man who doubled as his chauffeur. The clack of keys filled the cell as Hitler paced, spinning his life story into a manifesto. He called it Viereinhalb Jahre Kampf gegen Lüge, Dummheit und die Freiheit, 4.5 years of struggle against lies, stupidity, and cowardice. A mouthful, sure, but his publisher, Max Amann, had a better idea: Mein Kampf, My Struggle. Catchy, personal, and dripping with portent. Mein Kampf was part autobiography, part ideology, all venom. Hitler recounted his childhood in Braunau am Inn, his Vienna days of rejection, and his awakening to the Jewish question. He described Jews as a racial tuberculosis, a parasite undermining civilization, a grotesque lie rooted in Vienna's anti-Semitic rags and his own warped mind. But it wasn't just hate. He outlined a vision: Germany reborn as a racially pure empire, claiming Lebensraum, living space, in the East. Democracy was weak, he argued. Only a Führer could save the Volk. As Kershaw puts it, it was a blueprint for tyranny, dressed up as salvation. The writing was sloppy, rambling, repetitive, and riddled with tangents. Hitler jumped from rants about Marxism to musings on architecture, from war memories to tirades on propaganda. The broad masses, he wrote, are moved not by logic, but by emotion. Propaganda must be simple and unrelenting. It was a lesson he'd honed in Munich's beer halls, and now he codified it. Hess polished the prose, but the voice was pure Hitler, angry, obsessive, unyielding. Days in Landsberg followed a rhythm. Mornings, he dictated. Afternoons, he read Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Houston Stewart Chamberlain's racist tracts. Evenings, he held court with visitors like Alfred Rosenberg, the party's ideologue, or Hermann Göring, a swaggering World War I ace who'd escaped to Austria after the putsch. They plotted the Nazi comeback, debating tactics over tea. Hitler realized the putsch had been a mistake. Violence alone wouldn't win. He'd go legal next time, infiltrating the system like a virus. The prison wasn't all work. Hitler gained weight, those sausages added a paunch, and posed for photos, arms crossed, staring defiantly. He wrote letters to supporters, thanking them for cash and loyalty. One visitor, a young Heinrich Himmler, sat awestruck as Hitler rambled about destiny. Another, Joseph Goebbels, wasn't there yet but would soon idolize the man he'd called the instrument of God. Landsberg was a hub, a warped monastery where a cult of personality grew. By December 1924, Mein Kampf's first volume was done, 18 chapters, 400 pages of bile. Hitler wrapped it up with a flourish, a state which in this age of racial poisoning dedicates itself to the care of its best racial elements must someday become Lord of the Earth. Delusional? Yes. Dangerous? Absolutely. The book wouldn't sell much at first, fewer than 10,000 copies in its debut year, but it laid a foundation. Every Nazi would later own it, every German home would dread it. Then, freedom came fast. On December 20th, 1924, after just 9 months, Hitler walked out of Landsberg. Parole was a gift from a sympathetic judiciary, and he emerged to a small crowd of cheering supporters. The Nazi ban was lifting, the party stirring. He'd lost time but gained a gospel. As Shirer writes, Mein Kampf was the seed, the Third Reich would be the harvest. Let's dive into a theory. Did Hitler truly believe Mein Kampf's madness, or was it calculated propaganda? Historians split here. Robert G. L. Waite, in The Psychopathic God, argues Hitler's antisemitism was a deep-seated psychosis, a projection of self-loathing from his Vienna failures. Kershaw leans practical. Hitler tailored his hate to exploit Germany's mood, a tool more than a creed. Maybe it's both, a twisted mind meeting a perfect storm. What do you think, conviction or con? Now, the what if. What if Mein Kampf had never reached the masses? Imagine it languishing in obscurity, lost in Landsberg, suppressed by a stricter court, or burned by a wiser publisher. No blueprint for the Nazis, no rallying cry for the SA. Could the party have fizzled without its scripture? Richard J. Evans, in The Coming of the Third Reich, doubts it. Hitler's charisma might have carried him anyway. But a weaker ideology, less codified, might have slowed the juggernaut. Picture a world where his words stayed locked in that cell, chilling to consider. That's Chapter 3, Prison as a Paradox, Failure as Fuel. Hitler entered Landsberg a beaten man and left a prophet, his poison inked for posterity. Next, in Chapter 4, we'll watch him rebuild, turning a band party into a machine. But for now, ask yourself, was Mein Kampf the real putsch, one that succeeded where bullets failed? Drop your thoughts below, and let's keep this dark journey rolling. Chapter 4, Rebuilding and Strategizing, the Nazi Party in the late 1920s, 1925 to 1930. December 20th, 1924. Adolf Hitler steps out of Landsberg prison, a free man after just 9 months. His hair is combed, his suit pressed, and in his hands, he clutches the rough draft of Mein Kampf, a book of rage and ambition that's about to become his gospel. The Nazi Party is banned, its followers scattered, and Germany's fragile democracy seems to have dodged a bullet. But appearances deceive. Welcome to Chapter 4 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook. Today, we'll watch Hitler claw his way back, turning a broken movement into a machine of menace. And here's a question to spark your imagination. What if the Great Depression had never struck? Could prosperity have stopped Hitler in his tracks? Let's step into the late 1920s, a time of rebuilding, scheming, and a quiet storm brewing. Germany in 1925 was a nation trying to heal. The Weimar Republic, shaky as ever, had survived the chaos of 1923, hyperinflation was tamed, the Dawes Plan eased reparations with American loans, and the economy sputtered back to life. Streets once choked with wheelbarrows of worthless marks now buzzed with cautious optimism. The golden 20s flickered in Berlin, jazz clubs, flappers, and avant-garde art hinted at a modern Germany rising from the ashes of war. But beneath the surface, scars festered. Unemployment lingered, veterans nursed grudges, and the Versailles Treaty still chafed like a collar too tight. For many, Weimar wasn't a triumph, it was a compromise, a fragile truce in a nation itching for something stronger. Hitler emerged from prison a changed man, not humbled, but sharpened. Landsberg had taught him a lesson: storming beer halls with guns wouldn't win power. He'd play the game now, worming into democracy to destroy it from within. On February 27, 1925, he relaunched the Nazi Party at the Bürgerbräukeller, the same beer hall where the putsch had begun. The ban was lifted, thanks to Bavarian leniency, and 4,000 supporters crammed in to hear him. He strode to the podium, his voice hoarse but commanding. "The struggle continues," he roared, promising a legal path to victory. The crowd cheered, but not everyone was convinced. Party factions had splintered in his absence. Northern Nazis like Gregor Strasser pushed a socialist line, clashing with Hitler's obsession with absolute control. That night set the tone. Hitler demanded loyalty, unquestioning, total. He sidelined dissenters, centralizing power in Munich under his grip. As Ian Kershaw writes in Hitler, 1889–1936 Hubris, he emerged from prison not just a leader, but the leader, the Führer. The title stuck. Supporters began calling him that, a cultish reverence growing. He was 35, still a bachelor, still living modestly in a rented flat on Tierstrasse, but his presence loomed larger than ever. His mustache, now a signature, framed a face that was stern, intense, unyielding. Rebuilding wasn't easy. The Nazis were a fringe group. Membership hovered at 27,000 in 1925, a speck against Germany's 60 million. Funds were scarce, mostly from dues and small donors. Hitler leaned on propaganda, his old standby. He tapped Rudolf Hess, fresh from Landsberg, as his secretary, and Max Amann, a gruff ex-sergeant, to run the party's publishing arm, the Eher Verlag. Mein Kampf hit shelves in July 1925, priced at 12 marks, steep for the time. Sales were sluggish, 9,000 copies that year, but every party member was urged to buy it, spreading the word. A second volume followed in 1926, fleshing out his foreign policy fantasies. It was turgid, preachy, and poorly reviewed, yet it became scripture for the faithful. The Sturmabteilung, SA, or brown shirts, grew too. Ernst Röhm had fled to Bolivia after the putsch, but his lieutenants kept the SA alive as a street-fighting force. By 1925, Hitler recalled Röhm's spirit, if not the man himself yet, expanding the SA into a thuggish army. They wore surplus uniforms dyed brown, sporting swastika armbands, and numbered 1,000 by a year's end. Their job? Intimidate rivals, communists, socialists, Jews, and guard Nazi rallies. Beer hall brawls became their trademark, fists flying as Hitler spoke. "The SA is the battering ram of the movement," he boasted, and they proved it, breaking heads and headlines alike. But brute force wasn't enough. Hitler needed polish, a broader appeal. Enter the Schutzstaffel, the SS formed in 1925 as his personal bodyguard. It started small, just a handful of men under Julius Schreck, a barrel-chested loyalist. Clad in black, they swore an oath to Hitler alone, a dark seed planted for later horrors. For now, they were a sideshow to the SA swagger, but their discipline hinted at something colder, more calculated. Propaganda became an art form. Hitler tapped Joseph Goebbels, a sharp-tongued PhD with a limp and a gift for venom, to edit the party newspaper, Völkischer Beobachter. Goebbels joined in 1926, dazzled by Hitler's charisma at a Bamberg conference where Hitler crushed Strasser's faction. "I feel devastated," Goebbels wrote in his diary. "What a man! I bow to the greater one." The paper churned out anti-Semitic screeds, conspiracy tales, and Führer worship, circulation climbing to 25,000 by 1929. Posters, leaflets, and rallies multiplied, swastikas plastered walls, red banners fluttered over towns. Hitler's face, stern and staring, became a brand. The late 1920s were a slog. Elections showed the Nazis' limits: 2.6% of the vote in 1928, just 12 seats in the Reichstag. Weimar's stability mocked them. Gustav Stresemann, the foreign minister, steered Germany into the League of Nations, winning a Nobel Peace Prize in 1926. The economy hummed, unemployment dropped below 1 million, factories churned out cars and radios. Hitler fumed from the sidelines, preaching to rural crowds and urban malcontents. The calm before the storm, he called it, sensing cracks beneath the sheen. His personal life stayed sparse. He moved to a 9-room apartment at Prinzregentenplatz in 1929, funded by party cash, but lived like a recluse, books, Wagner records, and late-night rants to aides. Rumors swirled about Jelly Robbel, his niece, who lived with him from 1927. She was 19, vivacious, he was 38, possessive. Their relationship, uncle and niece, or something murkier, baffled even his inner circle. "She's the only woman he ever loved," Hess claimed, though evidence is thin. Her presence added a strange, human layer to a man growing inhuman. Then, the world broke. October 29, 1929, the Wall Street crash. America's collapse yanked loans from Germany, shattering the Dawes Plan. By 1930, unemployment soared past 3 million, banks failed, and soup lines stretched through Berlin. Weimar's golden glow faded to gray. Hitler grinned. "Our time is coming," he told Goebbels. The Nazis pounced, rallies swelled, membership doubled to 108,000. Rural farmers, ruined by falling prices, flocked to the swastika. Urban workers, jobless and bitter, listened. The SA swelled to 77,000, dwarfing the army's legal limit. Elections in September 1930 proved it. The Nazis surged to 18.3%, 107 seats, second only to the Social Democrats. Hitler, ineligible to run, still an Austrian citizen, beamed as his deputies stormed the Reichstag in brown uniforms, shouting Heil. Chaos reigned, coalitions faltered, street fights raged. The Depression wasn't just a crisis, it was his ladder. As Kershaw notes, without economic despair, Hitler might have remained a footnote. Let's explore a theory. Could Weimar have survived without Hitler? Some, like Richard J. Evans in The Coming of the Third Reich, argue its collapse was inevitable: too many enemies, too little faith. Others say a stronger Stresemann, who died in 1929, might have held it together. Hitler wasn't the only vulture. Communists and monarchists circled too. Was he the spark, or just the match that lit an already dry fuse? Now, the what if. What if the Great Depression never hit? Picture Germany chugging along, jobs steady, loans flowing, Stresemann steering. The Nazis might have stagnated, their 2.6% a ceiling, not a floor. No mass despair, no mass movement. Shirer speculates in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich that prosperity could have smothered Hitler's appeal. But his charisma, the SS fists, might they have found another crack? A chilling thought, a quieter rise, or none at all. That's Chapter 4, A Phoenix from Ashes, a Predator Poised. Hitler rebuilt his party into a weapon, waiting for the world to crack. Next, in Chapter 5, he'll seize the prize, Chancellor. But for now, ask, could good times have stopped him? Comment below, and let's keep unraveling this saga. Chapter 5, Electoral Success and Political Maneuvering, 1930 to 1933. September 14, 1930. Germany's polling stations hum with tension as millions cast ballots in a Reichstag election. The air is thick with desperation, unemployment has tripled in a year, banks are crumbling, and the Weimar Republic teeters on the edge. In Munich, Adolf Hitler watches the returns roll in, a rare smirk breaking his stern mask. The Nazis have just leaped from 12 seats to 107, a thunderclap that shakes Berlin to its core. Welcome to Chapter 5 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook. Today, we'll trace his climb from electoral underdog to chancellor, a 3-year dance of ballots, backrooms, and betrayal. And here's a question to ignite your curiosity: what if Germany's leaders had shut him out? Could democracy have held? Let's plunge into the chaos of 1930 to 1933 and find out. Germany in 1930 was a nation unraveling. The Great Depression had slammed it hard, American loans dried up after the Wall Street crash, factories shuttered, and by year's end, 3 million were jobless, a number that would double by 1932. Soup kitchens sprouted like weeds, children scavenged coal from rail yards. The Weimar Republic, already despised by many for Versailles, now faced a reckoning. Chancellor Heinrich Brüning, a dour economist, slashed wages and welfare, ruling by decree under President Paul von Hindenburg's emergency powers. Hunger Chancellor, they called him, and the nickname stuck. Parliament dissolved in July 1930, triggering the election that would change everything. Hitler saw gold in the ashes. The Nazis had languished in 1928 with 2.6% of the vote, but the Depression was his rocket fuel. His message, simple, brutal, relentless, resonated. Germany awake, he bellowed at rallies, blaming Jews, communists, and Weimar's traitors for the misery. The SA, now 77,000 strong, marched through towns, their brown shirts a menacing tide. Propaganda soared, Goebbels flooded streets with posters, work, freedom, bread. The swastika was everywhere, a symbol of rage and hope twisted together. On election night, the Nazis polled 18.3%, vaulting to second place behind the Social Democrats. At 41, Hitler, still an Austrian, still barred from office, became Germany's loudest voice. The Reichstag turned into a circus. Nazi deputies stormed in, heckling rivals, starting fistfights. Coalitions collapsed, Brüning clung to power, but governing was a fantasy. Hitler didn't need seats yet, he needed chaos. He crisscrossed Germany in 1931, speaking to tens of thousands, farmers in Saxony, workers in the Ruhr. His voice, raspy from overuse, mesmerized. He's like a preacher, one listener gushed, but with fire. The essay swelled to 170,000, outnumbering the army, clashing with communist Red Front fighters in bloody street wars. Berlin's cobblestones ran red, over 100 died in 1931 alone. Money flowed too. Industrialists like Fritz Thyssen, fearing socialism, funneled cash to the Nazis. Hitler's our bulwark, Thyssen said, betting on order over upheaval. Party membership hit 400,000, dues pouring into Munich headquarters. Hitler upgraded, renting the Baroque Palais Barlow as the Brown House, a nerve center buzzing with AIDS. He bought a Mercedes, toured in style, but kept his private life shadowy. Jelly Roble, his niece, lived with him until September 18, 1931, when she shot herself with his pistol. Was it love gone wrong, or his control snapping her spirit? She was my world, he sobbed to Hess, but rumors of obsession lingered. Her death haunted him, he went vegetarian, withdrew for weeks, but the machine rolled on. By 1932, Germany was a pressure cooker. Unemployment topped 6 million, 30% of the workforce. Brüning fell in May, replaced by Franz von Papen, a slick aristocrat Hindenburg liked but few others did. Papen lifted the SA ban, Brüning had outlawed it, unleashing a summer of violence, 500 clashes, 82 deaths. The July 1932 election was Hitler's pinnacle, 37.4%, 230 seats, the Nazis now the largest party. Crowds chanted Heil outside the Brown House as results trickled in. At 43, he was untouchable, yet still locked out of power. The Reichstag was a deadlock, no majority formed. Hitler ran for president in March 1932 against Hindenburg, an 84-year-old war hero coasting on nostalgia. Campaigning by plane, a first, he barnstormed Germany, drawing 100,000 in Berlin's Lustgarten. "The old man or the new," he cried. Hindenburg won, 53% to Hitler's 36.8%, but the race exposed Weimar's frailty, 13 million voted Nazi. Hindenburg grumbled, calling Hitler that Bohemian corporal, refusing to make him chancellor. Papen hung on, despised, ineffective. Behind closed doors, Hitler played chess. He met Papen, Hindenburg's son Oskar, and ex-chancellor Kurt von Schleicher, a schemer plotting his own comeback. "I'll join a cabinet," Hitler said, "but only as chancellor." They balked. His demands were steep: control of key ministries, emergency powers. Papen countered, offering vice-chancellor. Hitler stormed out. All or nothing, he snapped to Goebbels. Ascended into chaos. November 1932 saw Papen ousted, Schleicher in, then out by January 1933. Hindenburg, tired of the mess, wavered. January 30th, 1933. The deal clicked. Papen, now a kingmaker, convinced Hindenburg that Hitler could be tamed in a coalition, 2 conservatives for every Nazi in cabinet. At 11 a.m., in Hindenburg's office, Hitler took the oath, grinning ear to ear. He was 43, chancellor at last. Crowds roared outside, church bells rang. "We've done it," he told Hess. But the trap was his, he dismantled democracy from within. As Richard J. Evans writes in The Coming of the Third Reich, the appointment was less a victory than a surrender. A theory, was Weimar's fall inevitable? Evans argues yes, its enemies were too many, its roots too shallow. Others, like Kershaw and Hitler, 1889 to 1936 Hubris, say a united opposition might have held. Hitler exploited division. Without it, could he have stalled? The what if Hindenburg had said no? Imagine Papen or Schleicher clinging on, Nazis sidelined. No Reichstag fire, no enabling act, democracy limps along. Shirer in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich doubts it, Hitler's momentum was tidal. But a firm knee might have bought time. What do you think? Could one man have stopped him? That's Chapter 5 of Votes to Victory, Chaos to Conquest. Hitler turned despair into power, outfoxing a dying system. Next, Chapter 6, Total Control. For now, ponder, was this fate or failure? Comment below, and let's keep digging. Chapter 6, Seizing Total Control, 1933 to 1934. January 30th, 1933. Adolf Hitler stands in the Reich Chancellery, his hand raised in oath, his eyes glinting with triumph. At 43, he's just become Chancellor of Germany, a prize won not by bullets, but by ballots and backroom deals. Outside, torchlit crowds chant Heil as the swastika rises over Berlin. But this isn't the end, it's the beginning of a ruthless grab for absolute power. Welcome to Chapter 6 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook. Today, we'll witness Hitler dismantle a democracy in 18 months, turning Germany into a one-man state. And here's a question to stir your mind. What if President Hindenburg had lived longer, or died sooner? Could one old man's heartbeat have altered history? Let's dive into 1933 and 1934, a whirlwind of fire, fear, and blood. Germany in early 1933 was a tinderbox. The Weimar Republic, battered by the Depression, clung to life under a coalition cabinet, Hitler as Chancellor, Franz von Papen as Vice-Chancellor, and a handful of conservatives meant to box him in. President Paul von Hindenburg, 85 and fading, loomed as the last gatekeeper, grumbling about that bohemian corporal. Hitler's power was real but limited, 2 Nazis in cabinet, the Reichstag a fractious mess. He needed more. "We've got the foot in the door," he told Joseph Goebbels that night. "Now we kick it down." His first move was speed. On February 1st, he dissolved the Reichstag, calling new elections for March 5th. A clean sweep, he promised, aiming to bury the opposition. The SA, now 400,000 strong, hit the streets, smashing communist rallies, beating socialists, terrorizing Jews. Goebbels unleashed a propaganda blitz, radio broadcasts, posters, and newsreels screamed order or chaos. Hitler barnstormed the country, speaking to 100,000 in Dortmund, 80,000 in Cologne. "The nation demands a reckoning," he roared, his voice cracking from strain. The Sturmabteilung's brown tide flowed behind him, a fist wrapped in a ballot. Then, on February 27, 1933, the Reichstag burned. Flames gutted the Parliament building in Berlin, glass shattering, smoke billowing into the night. A Dutch communist, Marinus van der Lubbe, was caught at the scene, dazed, half-naked, clutching matches. Hitler raced to the blaze, staring wild-eyed. "This is a God-given signal," he shouted to Hermann Göring, his interior minister. "We'll show no mercy." Within hours, he declared it a communist plot, a beacon of revolution. Historians still debate, was van der Lubbe a lone arsonist, or a Nazi pawn? Ian Kershaw, in Hitler, 1889–1936 Hubris, leans toward coincidence exploited ruthlessly, others whisper Göring's men lit the match. Truth blurred, but the fire was Hitler's spark. The next day, February 28th, Hitler handed Hindenburg a decree, the Reichstag Fire Decree. It suspended civil liberties, speech, press, assembly, gave police unchecked power, and let the state arrest anyone as a threat. Hindenburg, doddering and trusting Papen's assurances, signed it. For the nation's safety, he mumbled. Overnight, thousands were rounded up, communists, socialists, unionists, hauled to makeshift camps. The SA gleefully joined in, beating prisoners with truncheons. Göring crowed, "Every bullet that leaves a police pistol is my bullet." Democracy's guardrails snapped. The March 5th election wasn't free. With rivals jailed or fleeing, the Nazis polled 43.9%, 288 seats, still shy of a majority. Hitler allied with the Nationalists, 8%, cobbling together control. On March 23, he pushed the Enabling Act through a cowed Reichstag, meeting in the Kroll Opera House, the charred parliament a grim backdrop. The law let him rule by decree, bypassing Parliament and Hindenburg. Social Democrats resisted, Otto Welles defiantly declaring, "You can take our liberty, but not our honor." SA thugs lined the walls, glaring. The vote, 444–94. "The Republic is dead," Welles whispered as Hitler smirked. At 43, he was dictator in all but name. Spring 1933 was a blur of consolidation. Trade unions were banned May 2nd, their offices stormed by SA men smashing desks and skulls. Other parties dissolved, Social Democrats by June, conservatives like Papen's Center Party by July, bullied into voluntary surrender. The Nazi Party became Germany's only legal faction. Goebbels took the airwaves as propaganda minister, purging dissent from radio, newspapers, films. "The press is my orchestra," he bragged, tuning it to Hitler's pitch. The swastika flew everywhere, schools, factories, churches. Jews felt the noose tighten. April 1st saw a nationwide boycott, SA guards outside Jewish shops, signs snarling "Don't buy from Jews." Violence flared, storefronts smashed, owners beaten. Laws followed, Jews barred from civil service, law, medicine. A clean break, Hitler called it, testing Germany's pulse. Most shrugged or cheered. Antisemitism, festering since Vienna, now had state sanction. The SS, still small under Heinrich Himmler, opened Dachau in March, a camp for enemies, its barbed wire a dark omen. But power had cracks. The SA, now 2 million strong by 1934, was a problem. Ernst Röhm, back from Bolivia, led it with swagger, dreaming of a people's army to replace the Reichswehr, the 100,000-man force Versailles allowed. The revolution isn't over, Röhm barked, eyeing Hitler's cushy deals with elites. The army brass, led by General Werner von Blomberg, bristled. Röhm's rabble threatened their turf. Industrialists like Tyson, who'd bankrolled Hitler, fretted too. The SA socialist talk spooked them. Even within the party, Göring and Himmler chafed. Röhm was too loud, too loose. Hitler wavered. Röhm was an old comrade, loyal since 1921, a putsch veteran. But loyalty clashed with strategy. The SA must be tamed, he told Hess in May 1934. Hindenburg, frail at 86, added pressure, "Clean up your thugs, or I will," he growled through Poppin. The army dangled a carrot, "Back us, and we'll back you." Hitler chose survival over sentiment. June 30th, 1934, the night of the long knives. It was a bloodbath planned in shadows. Hitler, Göring, and Himmler struck. SS squads fanned out, lists in hand. Röhm was nabbed at a Bavarian resort, half-drunk with SA cronies. "Adolf's betrayed us," he yelled as guns barked. In Munich, Berlin, Dresden, dozens fell, SA leaders shot in cellars, dumped in ditches. Hitler flew to Munich himself, confronting Röhm's men with a pistol, screaming, "You're finished." By July 2nd, over 85 were dead, some say 200, numbers murky. Victims stretched beyond the SA. Schleicher, the ex-chancellor, gunned down at home. Gregor Strasser, a rival, executed in a cell. Hitler justified it on July 13th, claiming a Röhm plot to seize power. Lies, but effective. Hindenburg praised him, "You've saved Germany." The army saluted. The SA was slashed to a ceremonial shell, its teeth pulled. The SS, bloodied and loyal, rose. Himmler's star now ascended. On August 2nd, 1934, Hindenburg died, heart failure at 87. Hitler pounced, merging chancellor and president into Führer. The army swore a personal oath to him that day, "I swear by God to obey Adolf Hitler." At 45, he was Germany law, state, soul. A theory, was total control inevitable once Hitler took office? Kershaw argues yes, his ruthlessness and Weimar's rot made it so. Others, like Evans in The Coming of the Third Reich, say resistance could have slowed him, Union defiance, army rebellion. Was it fate, or a failure of will? The what-if What if Hindenburg had lived, or died earlier? Alive longer, he might have curbed Hitler post-fire, vetoed the enabling act. Dead sooner, say, 1932, Schleicher might have ruled, sidelining Hitler. Shirer and the rise and fall of the Third Reich doubts of frail Hindenburg could have stopped the tide. But timing was everything. Could one heartbeat have shifted the gears? That's Chapter 6, Democracy Torched, Rivals Bled Out, a Führer Crowned. Hitler seized Germany in 18 months, his grip iron. Next, Chapter 7, Nazi Rule Unleashed. For now, ask, was Hindenburg the last break, or a broken one? Comment below, and let's keep this dark ride rolling. Chapter 7, Nazi Germany's Domestic Policies and Preparations for War, 1934 to 1939. August 2nd, 1934. Berlin is draped in black and red as President Paul von Hindenburg takes his last breath at 87. Within hours, Adolf Hitler declares himself Führer, leader of Germany, fusing chancellor and president into one unshakable throne. The army swears an oath to him that day, their voices echoing through barracks, "I swear by God to obey Adolf Hitler." At 45, he's no longer a politician, he's the state. Welcome to Chapter 7 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook. Today, we'll walk through 5 years of Nazi rule, 1934 to 1939, where Germany transforms into a machine of control, propaganda, and war. Here's a question to spark your thoughts. What if diplomacy had held him back? Could peace have outlasted his ambitions? Let's step into the Third Reich and see. Germany in 1934 was Hitler's canvas, raw, restless, and ready to be painted in swastikas. The night of the long knives had silenced the SS roar, leaving Ernst Röhm's blood on the floor and the SS rising in its place. The enabling act gave Hitler decree power, opposition was ash. Total control wasn't just about guns, though. It was about hearts, minds, and steel. He moved fast, reshaping society with a dictator's brush. One people, one Reich, one Führer, he proclaimed at Nuremberg rallies, the crowds roar a tidal wave. The next 5 years would forge Nazi Germany into a fortress, inside and out. First came the economy. The Depression still lingered, with 5 million jobless in 1933. Hitler promised work, and he delivered, in a way. Public projects exploded, autobahns snaked across the countryside, 3,000 miles of pristine road by 1939, a propaganda win even if cars were scarce. Labor camps, like the Reich Labor Service, swallowed young men, shoveling dirt for 25 pfennigs a day. Rearmament was the real engine, factories hummed, churning out tanks, planes, rifles, defying Versailles. Unemployment plunged to 1 million by 1936, a miracle trumpeted by Goebbels. The Führer has banished hunger, posters crowed. The reality was shakier. Adam Tooze, in The Wages of Destruction, notes that Germany's recovery was built on borrowed time and borrowed money. Schacht, the economic wizard, jibbled loans and currency tricks, using Mefo bills, fake credit to hide the spending. By 1939, the Reichsbank was near broke, food rationed, consumer goods thin. Workers gained jobs but lost rights, unions were crushed, strikes banned, wages frozen. The German Labor Front, under Robert Ley, replaced solidarity with slogans, strength through joy. It offered cheap holidays, cruises to Madeira, VW Beatles promised but rarely delivered. A carrot dangled, never quite eaten. Society bent to Hitler's will. Education turned into indoctrination, textbooks rewrote history, biology preached Aryan superiority. Boys joined the Hitler Youth, 7.3 million by 1939, marching, saluting, singing, today Germany, tomorrow the world. Girls in the League of German Maidens learned motherhood was their sacred duty. The youth serves the Führer, Hitler said, and they did, some fanatically, others grudgingly. Churches bowed or broke, Protestants formed a Reich Church under Nazi banners, Catholics signed a shaky Concordat in 1933, soon ignored. Pastors like Dietrich Bonhoeffer resisted, but most knelt. Propaganda was omnipresent. Goebbels, now Reich minister, controlled every word, image, sound. Radios, dubbed people's receivers, blared Hitler's speeches into homes, 70% penetration by 1939. Films like Triumph of the Will dazzled. Leni Riefenstahl's camera made Nuremberg a mythic stage, 100,000 torchbearers, Hitler descending like a god. Newspapers parroted the party line, dissenters vanished. The German mind is ours, Goebbels boasted, and he wasn't wrong. Fear and fervor fused into obedience. The Jews suffered most. Persecution escalated. 1935's Nuremberg Law stripped citizenship, banned marriage with Aryans. Jews are not human, Hitler told aides, echoing Mein Kampf. Kristallnacht, November 9th to 10th, 1938, unleashed hell. SA and civilians smashed 7,500 Jewish shops, burned 267 synagogues, killed 91. Goebbels spun it as spontaneous anger after a diplomat's assassination. It was orchestrated terror. Over 30,000 Jews were dragged to camps, Dachau, Buchenwald, Sachsenhausen, now swelling with undesirables. Immigration surged. 180,000 fled by 1939, but doors closed as Hitler tightened the screws. Control deepened with the SS. Heinrich Himmler, a bespectacled ex-chicken farmer, turned it into a state within a state. By 1936, he ran all police, Gestapo included, merging terror with bureaucracy. Black uniforms multiplied, 50,000 strong by 1939. Their skull badges were a death's head promise. Camps grew, torture, starvation, re-education for communists, gays, Jehovah's Witnesses. Himmler dreamed of an Aryan elite, the SS's knights, ruthless, loyal only to Hitler. "We are the lightning," he said, and Germany felt the storm. War loomed. Rearmament wasn't just jobs, it was destiny. Hitler named Göring four-year plan chief in 1936, aiming for self-sufficiency, synthetic oil, rubber, steel. The army swelled to 800,000 by 1939, Versailles memory. The Luftwaffe took wing, 1,000 planes, pilots trained in secret. The Navy rebuilt U-boats, battleships like the Bismarck. Guns before butter, Göring quipped, and civilians paid, coffee vanished, meat rationed. Hitler didn't hide it. At the 1936 Nuremberg rally, he thundered, "We must prepare for the struggle ahead." Lebensraum, living space, was his obsession, the East his target. Foreign policy turned bold. March 7, 1936, troops marched into the Rhineland, demilitarized since 1919. France and Britain blinked, appeasing rather than fighting. "We've called their bluff," Hitler crowed to Ribbentrop, his foreign minister. The Tsar rejoined Germany in 1935 via plebiscite. Austria fell in March 1938. The Anschluss, cheered by crowds, condemned by no one with teeth. Munich, September 1938. Chamberlain handed over the Sudetenland, peace in our time. Hitler laughed privately, "They'll swallow anything." By 1939, he'd swallowed Czechoslovakia whole, Memel too. Each step, unopposed, fed his hunger. Inside, Hitler's life grew eccentric. He retreated to the Berghof, his Bavarian chalet, with Eva Braun, a blonde shopgirl now his mistress. Days were late, Wagner operas, rants to aides, vegetarian meals. He doodled buildings, dreams of a Germania capital with domes dwarfing Rome's. "I'm an artist at heart," he told Speer, his architect, sketching a future atop ruins. Paranoia crept in, bodyguards tripled, food tasters hired. Power isolated him, even as it swelled. By 1939, Germany was a juggernaut, economy stretched, army primed, people molded. August 23, the Nazi Soviet pact stunned the world. Hitler and Stalin, uneasy bedfellows, carved up Poland. War was days away. "The hour has struck," he told generals, eyes alight. At 50, he'd built a Reich ready to burn the map. Let's explore a theory. Was war inevitable under Hitler? Kershaw, in Hitler, 1936 to 1945 Nemesis, says yes, his ideology demanded it. Lebensraum is gospel. Tooze argues economics forced his hand. Germany's bubble would burst without conquest. Could a saner leader have paused? Doubtful. Hitler was the Reich, and the Reich was war. Now, the what if? What if diplomacy had contained him? Imagine France and Britain striking at the Rhineland, or Munich holding firm. No Anschluss, no Sudetenland, Hitler humbled, perhaps toppled. Anthony Beaver, in the Second World War, doubts it. Appeasement was too ingrained, Hitler too driven. A harder line might have delayed the inferno, though. Could peace have lasted? That's Chapter 7, A Nation Remade, a War Machine Wound. Hitler turned Germany into his image, disciplined, deadly, doomed. Next, Chapter 8, Blitzkrieg Unleashed. For now, ask yourself, was war his fate, or ours? Comment below, and let's keep this dark tale spinning. Chapter 8, Blitzkrieg and Early Victories, 1939 to 1941. September 1st, 1939. Dawn breaks over Poland as German tanks roar across the border, guns blazing, skies thick with Luftwaffe bombers. At 4:45 a.m., the Schleswig-Holstein, a pre-dreadnought battleship, unleashes its salvo on Danzig, signaling the start of World War II. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler, now 50, addresses the Reichstag in a gray field uniform, his voice a mix of calm and menace. "I am asking of no German man more than I myself was ready to do." Welcome to Chapter 8 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook. Today, we'll race through 2 years of Blitzkrieg, 1939 to 1941, where Hitler's war machine carves a path of stunning victories. Here's a question to ignite your imagination. What if Britain had fallen in 1940? How would the world have shifted? Let's charge into the fire and fury of war. Germany in 1939 was primed for this moment. 5 years of rearmament had forged an army of 1.5 million, a Luftwaffe of 4,000 planes, and a navy itching to break Versailles chains. The Nazi-Soviet Pact, signed August 23, split Poland with Stalin, buying Hitler a free hand in the West. He'd tested the waters, Rhineland, Austria, Czechoslovakia, all swallowed without a fight. Now, he gambled big. Poland was the trigger, its 35 million people and vast plains a stepping stone to Lebensraum, living space in the East. "Close your hearts to pity," he told his generals. "Act brutally." They obeyed. The invasion was lightning, Blitzkrieg in its purest form. Panzer divisions, spearheaded by generals like Heinz Guderian, sliced through Polish lines, tanks rolling 40 miles a day. Stuka dive bombers screamed from above, shattering morale, infantry mopped up the chaos. Poland's army, 1 million strong, fought bravely but was outmatched, its cavalry no match for steel. Warsaw held 28 days, bombed to rubble, surrendering September 27. Stalin's Red Army grabbed the East, per their deal. By October 6, Poland was gone, split between tyrants. Over 60,000 Poles died, Germany lost 10,000. Hitler toured the front, grinning at the wreckage. "This is how we win," he told Ribbentrop. Britain and France declared war September 3, but it was a hollow gesture. The phony war followed, 8 months of inaction. French troops sat behind the Maginot Line, a concrete fortress facing Germany. Britain sent planes over Berlin, dropping leaflets, not bombs. Hitler laughed. "They think words will stop me." He pivoted west, plotting spring 1940. Norway and Denmark fell first, April 9, a preemptive strike to secure iron ore and naval bases. Paratroopers seized Oslo. Quisling, a traitor, waved the swastika. Denmark caved in hours. Churchill, now First Lord of the Admiralty, fumed at the Allies' sluggishness. May 10, 1940, the hammer fell. Germany struck Western Europe, bypassing the Maginot Line through neutral Belgium and the Ardennes, a forest France thought impassable. Panzers burst out, Guderian again at the helm, racing 200 miles in days. Holland surrendered May 15, Rotterdam flattened by bombs. Belgium buckled May 28, King Leopold III capitulating as British and French troops fled to Dunkirk. There, 338,000 escaped by sea, a miracle amid disaster, ferried by warships and fishing boats under Luftwaffe fire. Hitler halted the panzers, a blunder historians still debate, Göring promised air power would finish them. It didn't. France crumbled fast. June 14th, Paris fell, undefended, swastikas over the Eiffel Tower. Pétain, an 84-year-old World War I hero, signed an armistice June 22nd at Compiègne, the same railcar where Germany surrendered in 1918. Hitler danced a jig, caught on film, relishing revenge. France split, Vichy in the south, a puppet, the north occupied. Over 90,000 French died, Germany 27,000. In 6 weeks, Hitler owned Western Europe, his empire stretching from the Atlantic to Poland. "I've done what Napoleon couldn't," he boasted to Speer. Britain stood alone. Churchill, Prime Minister since May 10th, rallied, "We shall fight on the beaches." Hitler unleashed Operation Sea Lion, an invasion plan, but first came the skies. The Battle of Britain began July 10, 1940. Göring's Luftwaffe, 2,500 planes, aimed to break the RAF, soften England for landings. Eagles clashed over Kent, Spitfires and Hurricanes met Messerschmitts. August 15th saw 1,800 German sorties, 75 planes downed. Hitler shifted September 7th, bombing London, the Blitz, 43,000 civilians dead by May 1941, cities aflame. The RAF held, radar and grid outmatching numbers. Sea Lion stalled, Hitler blinked. Inside Germany, victory swelled Nazi pride. Rationing bit harder, meat scarce, but propaganda spun gold. Goebbels screened newsreels, panzers rolling, flags rising. The Führer's genius, they cheered. Hitler grew erratic, micromanaging from the Wolf's Lair, a bunker in East Prussia. Eva Braun stayed at the Berghof, hosting tea while he raged at maps. His health dipped. Dr. Morell dosed him with pills, amphetamines sharpening his edge. "The world trembles," he told aides, dreaming of Moscow, London, beyond. 1941 turned east. The Balkans fell first, a prelude. Yugoslavia and Greece resisted April 6th, Belgrade bombed, Athens taken by April 27th. Hitler secured his flank, oil from Romania, a path to Russia. Then, June 22nd, 1941, Operation Barbarossa, the war's pivot. 3 million Axis troops, 3,000 tanks, 2,000 planes smashed into the Soviet Union, the largest invasion in history. Minsk fell in days, Smolensk by July, 600,000 Soviets captured. Stalin reeled, Hitler crowed, "We've only to kick in the door." By December, his army stood 20 miles from Moscow, snow dusting their boots. Blitzkrieg shone, speed, surprise, slaughter. Poland took a month, France 6 weeks, the Balkans 3. Russia bled, 2 million dead or captured by year's end. Yet cracks showed. Logistics stretched, winter loomed. Hitler ignored pleas to pause, fixated on Lebensraum. "Russia is our destiny," he told Halder, his chief of staff. The West watched, awed and afraid. Churchill begged Roosevelt for aid, Stalin dug in. A theory, could Germany have won with different moves? Anthony Beevor, in the Second World War, says no, resources were too thin, Russia too vast. Others argue halting at Dunkirk or skipping Britain might have focused Hitler east, crushing Stalin first. Was victory ever his, or just an illusion? The what if Operation Sea Lion succeeded and Britain fell? Picture London under swastikas, Churchill dead or exiled, no Western Front. America hesitates, Russia fights alone. Ian Kershaw and Hitler, 1936 to 1945 nemesis, doubts sustainability, resistance would have bled Germany dry. But a Nazi Atlantic shifts all, no D-Day, a darker war. Could it have happened? That's Chapter 8, Blitzkrieg's Blaze, Victories Piled High. Hitler redrew Europe in blood, unstoppable, until Russia's shadow grew. Next, Chapter 9, The Tide Turns. For now, ask, was Britain stand the hinge of fate? Comment below, and let's charge on. Chapter 9, The Tide Turns, 1942 to 1945. December 1941. German troops shiver in the snow, just 20 miles from Moscow, their breath fogging in -40-degree cold. Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's grand gamble, has stalled. The Red Army strikes back, hurling 1 million men at the invaders. In Berlin, Adolf Hitler, 52 and graying, pores over maps in the wolf's lair, his hands trembling from strain or drugs. The invincible Reich is cracking. Welcome to Chapter 9 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook. Today, we'll trace the turning tide of World War II, 1942 to 1945, where triumphs crumble into ruin. Here's a question to stir your mind. What if Hitler had avoided his fatal blunders? Could Germany have held? Let's march into the abyss of defeat. Germany in 1942 was a colossus on shaky legs. The Blitzkrieg of 1939 to 1941 had redrawn Europe's map, from Poland's plains to France's shores, but the invasion of Russia, Operation Barbarossa, had overreached. Launched June 22, 1941, it sent 3 million Axis troops thundering east, capturing 3 million Soviets by December. Moscow loomed, tantalizingly close, yet untaken. Winter struck like a hammer, temperatures plunged, supply lines froze, and the Wehrmacht lost 250,000 to frostbite and starvation. Stalin's reserves, endless and hardened, counterattacked December 5, pushing the Germans back 100 miles. Hitler sacked his generals, Brauchitsch and Guderian among them, seizing direct command. Victory or death, he raged to aides, his voice echoing in the bunker's concrete halls. The East was no quick conquest. Then came a global shift. December 7, 1941, Japan bombed Pearl Harbor, pulling the United States into the war. 4 days later, December 11th, Hitler declared war on America, a decision as bold as it was reckless. Roosevelt's a fool, he sneered to Ribbentrop, dismissing a nation of 130 million with factories that would soon churn out 300,000 planes and 100,000 tanks. The Allies now spanned the world, Churchill in London, Stalin in Moscow, Roosevelt in Washington. Germany faced a vice of steel and will, its enemies united by Hitler's hubris. 1942 opened with strain. North Africa was the first crack. Erwin Rommel, the Desert Fox, had driven Britain's forces to El Alamein by July, 60 miles from Alexandria, Egypt's lifeline. His Africa Corps, sleek and daring, seemed unstoppable. But Montgomery, Britain's bulldog, took command of the Eighth Army, digging in with 200,000 men and 1,000 tanks. October 23rd, a barrage of 1,000 guns lit the desert, tanks clashed in swirling sand. Rommel, short on fuel and men, broke November 4th, retreating 1,500 miles across Libya. Hitler forbade it, screaming over the phone, "Stand or die." Rommel defied him, saving scraps of his force. Operation Torch, November 8th, saw Allied landings in Morocco and Algeria, squeezing the Axis out by May 1943. Over 250,000 Germans and Italians surrendered. North Africa was lost. Then, Stalingrad, the war's fulcrum. August 23, 1942, the Sixth Army, under Friedrich Paulus, hit the Volga River, aiming to choke Soviet oil from the Caucasus. Luftwaffe bombs turned Stalingrad to rubble. Stalin ordered, "Not one step back." The city became a meat grinder, snipers in shattered factories, bayonets in basements, rats gnawing the dead. By November, 300,000 Axis troops held a shrinking pocket. November 19th, Operation Uranus, a Soviet pincer, encircled them, 1.2 million Reds closing the trap. Hitler refused retreat. "Fight to the last man," he barked from Berlin. Göring promised air supply. It flopped. 200 planes lost to ice and flak. Starving, frostbitten, Paulus held until February 2nd, 1943, then surrendered, 91,000 survivors staggering into captivity. Over 800,000 Axis dead or gone, Soviet losses topped 1 million. Anthony Beevor, in the Second World War, calls it the hinge of fate. Hitler wept, then vowed revenge. The home front felt the strain. Allied bombing intensified. May 30th, 1942, Cologne took 1,000 tons in the first 1,000-bomber raid, a taste of hell to come. Hamburg burned July 1943, a firestorm killing 42,000, civilians choked in melted asphalt. Ration cards shrank, meat vanished, bread thinned. Goebbels rallied Berlin Sportpalast, February 18, 1943, 15,000 roaring total war. Women joined factories, 12-hour shifts, slave labor, 7 million from conquered lands, propped the Reich. Hitler retreated deeper, Wolf's lair to Berghof, his hands shaky from Dr. Morell's pills, amphetamines fueling late-night rants. Eva Braun baked cakes at the chalet, a bizarre normalcy amid collapse. 1943 bled the Reich dry. The Eastern Front crumbled. Kursk, July 5 to 23, saw the war's biggest tank battle, 6,000 clashing in Ukraine's fields. Soviet T-34s outgunned Panzers. Germany lost 500,000 men, its armored spine broken. Mussolini fell July 25, Italy switching sides by September, opening a southern front. Hitler sent troops to hold Rome, draining reserves. The tide wasn't just turning, it was a flood. 1944 broke the back. June 6th, D-Day. Over 156,000 Allied troops stormed Normandy, beaches red with blood, 4,000 dead in hours. Eisenhower's gamble cracked Hitler's Atlantic Wall. Rommel, defending France, begged for retreat. Hitler refused, fixated on a counterattack that never came. Paris fell August 25th, cheers drowning swastikas. The West closed in. Eastward, Operation Bagration, June 22nd, smashed Army Group Center, 400,000 Germans lost in Belarus, Soviets racing to Poland. By August, they stood at the Vistula, Berlin in sight. Inside, dissent flared. July 20th, 1944, Operation Valkyrie. Colonel Claus von Stauffenberg planted a bomb at the Wolf's Lair, aiming to kill Hitler and coup the regime. It exploded, 12:42 p.m., a table leg shielded Hitler, for died, he staggered out, singed but alive. Providence spares me, he roared, then purged, 5,000 executed, Rommel forced to suicide. The Reich tightened, Himmler's SS crushed all whispers. 1945 was the endgame. January 27th, Auschwitz liberated, 1.1 million dead exposed, a horror Hitler denied to his last breath. The Soviets crossed the Oder, 50 miles from Berlin, Allies bridged the Rhine March 7th. Hitler, 55, hunched in the Führer bunker under Berlin, a concrete tomb. April 16th, Zhukov's 2.5 million men encircled the city, shells pounding. Civilians starved, boys and old men drafted, Volkssturm clutching rifles. April 30th, Hitler shot himself, Eva Braun beside him, cyanide and bullets sealing their end. May 7th, Germany surrendered, Donitz signing at Reims. Over 5 million German dead, Europe ash. A theory, could Germany have won with better choices? Adam Tooze, in The Wages of Destruction, says no, the economy was a house of cards, Russia too vast. Others argue skipping Russia, focusing west, might have held the line. Was defeat baked in, or squandered? The what if Hitler avoided his blunders? Imagine no U.S. war, no Stalingrad trap, a defensive Reich. Ian Kershaw, in Hitler, 1936 to 1945 Nemesis, doubts longevity, Allies would have ground him down. But a tighter strategy shifts years, maybe borders. Could he have clung on? That's Chapter 9, Triumph to Tragedy, a Reich Undone. Hitler's tide rose, then crashed in blood and ruin. Next, Chapter 10, Legacy and Lessons. For now, ask, were his mistakes the Allies' salvation? Comment below, and let's close this dark saga. Chapter 10, Legacy, Theories, and What Ifs. April 30th, 1945. The Berlin sky is a shroud of smoke, pierced by the relentless thud of Soviet artillery. Beneath the shattered Reich Chancellery, in a bunker reeking of damp concrete and despair, Adolf Hitler, now 56, sits hunched, his once commanding frame withered by time and defeat. Eva Braun, his bride of mere hours, smooths her skirt beside him. At 3:30 p.m., a single gunshot splits the silence, cyanide's bitter tang follows. The Führer is gone, his empire ash. Welcome to Chapter 10 of Hitler's Rise and Fall, a comprehensive audiobook, our final stop. Today, we'll piece together his end, probe the wounds he carved into history, and wrestle with the theories and what-ifs that linger like ghosts. Could victory have been his? What if it had? Let's step into the aftermath and ask the hard questions. Spring 1945 was Germany's unraveling. The Third Reich, a 12-year inferno, had consumed itself and half a continent. The Soviet offensive began April 16, 2.5 million troops encircling Berlin, their shells turning streets to dust. Hitler's last stand was the Führer bunker, a claustrophobic warren 30 feet below ground. Boys of the Hitler Youth, some barely 13, and gray-haired Volkssturm conscripts faced T-34 tanks with rifles and prayers. Food was scraps, hope was extinct. On April 29th, Hitler married Eva Braun in a bleak ceremony, aides toasting with looted wine. The next day, he rambled a final testament, cursing the Jew for his downfall, then pressed a Walther pistol to his temple. Eva bit her capsule. Their bodies were hauled upstairs, soaked in petrol, and torched as shells rained. May 2nd, Berlin fell, Soviet banners atop the Reichstag. May 7th, Karl Donitz, Hitler's fleeting successor, signed surrender in Reims. May 8th, VE Day, the world sighed relief. Over 5 million Germans dead, 70 million globally, the butcher's bill of one man's reign. The collapse was a whirlwind of fates. Joseph Goebbels, propaganda's maestro, stayed in the bunker, poisoning his 6 children with cyanide-laced drinks May 1st, then shooting himself and his wife Magda, their bodies burned beside Hitler's. Hermann Göring, Luftwaffe chief, surrendered May 6 to Americans, his uniform sagging over a drug-wasted frame. He cheated the noose with poison in 1946. Heinrich Himmler, SS architect, fled in disguise, caught by British troops, and bit a cyanide pill May 23. Rudolf Hess, long a prisoner in Britain, lived till 1987 in Spandau's silence. Albert Speer, the architect, roamed free briefly, later penning memoirs of regret. The Nuremberg trials opened November 20, 1945, in a shattered city's courthouse. 22 Nazi leaders faced justice. Göring swaggered, Ribbentrop stammered, Hans Frank wept. 10 swung from gallows October 16, 1946, their ashes scattered in a Munich creek, a final erasure. The trials tallied 11 million murdered, 6 million Jews, millions more, Roma, Slavs, disabled, slaughtered in camps like Auschwitz, freed January 27, 1945, its gas chambers a mute scream. Hitler's legacy is a scar across time. Germany fractured, the West rose under Allied care, the East groaned under Soviet boots, a Cold War born in his wake. The Holocaust's horror, laid bare at liberation, rewrote humanity's ledger. 1.1 million at Auschwitz alone, skeletal survivors stumbling into light. Primo Levi's survival in Auschwitz etched their pain, deniers still mutter, drowned by mountains of proof, photos, records, graves. The swastika, once a roar of pride, became a hiss of hate, outlawed in Germany, scrawled by fringe zealots elsewhere. His name, a rallying cry in 1933, is a synonym for evil by 1945, a warning carved in history's stone. The world he broke reshaped itself. Europe's borders shifted, Poland slid west, millions displaced. The United Nations rose in 1945, a fragile shield against tyrants. NATO followed in 1949, eyeing Moscow's shadow. In Germany, denazification scrubbed swastikas from minds and walls, teachers, judges, clerks purged or re-educated. Schools now drill the Holocaust into every child, a mandated memory. Berlin's Memorial to the Murdered Jews of Europe, unveiled 2005, stands stark, 2,711 concrete slabs, a silent dirge. Reunification in 1990 knit East and West, but economic rifts linger, a faint echo of his war's toll. Today, his ghost prowls. Neo-Nazis fester in dark corners, ex-posts and rallies tracked by watchdogs like the Southern Poverty Law Center. Antisemitism flares, a 2020 spike logging 2,000 incidents in the U.S. alone. Yet resistance grows, museums, films, books dissect him. Downfall, 2004, captures his bunker ranting, Bruno Ganz's snarl a study in collapse. William L. Shirer's The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, a 1960 tome, still looms. Adam Tooze's The Wages of Destruction crunches his economic folly. Mein Kampf, re-released 2016 with critical notes, sells as a lesson, not a creed. He's a case study, not a cause. Theories swirl around him. Was he a madman or a mastermind? Robert G. L. Waite's The Psychopathic God dives deep, a boy warped by a brutal father, Alois, and a doting mother, Clara, whose 1907 death unmoored him. Vienna's rejection, anti-Semitic rags, festered into obsession. Ian Kershaw, in Hitler, 1936 to 1945 nemesis, sees less lunacy, more opportunism, a gambler riding Germany's despair, his hate a tool, not a trance. Did he believe his own venom? Waite says yes, a paranoid core, Tooze leans no, a cynic exploiting chaos. His psyche's a kaleidoscope, rage, charisma, delusion. Another theory, could Germany have won? Tooze's economic lens says no, the Reich was a paper tiger, oil and steel too scarce by 1942. Anthony Beevor's The Second World War backs it, Stalingrad snapped the spine, Russia's depth a grave. Yet some speculate, no U.S. war, no Barbarossa split, a focused West might have held. Alan Bullock's Hitler, a study in tyranny calls victory a mirage, Hitler's blunders, Dunkirk, Moscow, sealed fate. Debate rages, but rubble answers. What if stretch imagination? What if Hitler had won World War II? Gabriel D. Rosenfeld's The World Hitler Never Made paints it, Britain a vassal, swastikas over Westminster, America cowed, Russia a slave state to Berlin. Holocaust global, Aryan cities rising on bones. Tooze doubts it lasts, slave labor crumbles, resistance bleeds. Philip K. Dick's The Man in the High Castle spins a tale, axis split, tension simmering, collapse inevitable. A nightmare, plausible yet frail. What if he died young? Art school in 1908 accepts him, he paints Vienna's spires, not swastikas. Or World War I trench takes him, 1918, a corporal's grave in Flanders. No putsch, no Mein Kampf, Weimar wobbles, maybe falls to communists or monarchists. Bullock sees his rise as luck, right rage, right time. A world without him? Lighter, perhaps, or just differently dark. What if a lie struck early? Rhineland, 1936. France rolls tanks, Hitler retreats, shamed. Munich, 1938. Chamberlain says no, war sparks, Germany unready. Beaver doubts Allied guts, Kershaw sees Hitler's bluff untested. Appeasement fed his hunger, a fist might have starved it. History teeters on such hinges. His mind's a riddle. Weight traces trauma, Clara's death, Aloys's belt, Vienna's slums. Dr. Morell's logs, 1943 to 1945, list 28 drugs, amphetamines for fire, sedatives for calm, a cocktail fueling paranoia. Kershaw's working towards the Führer idea, age chased his nods, amplifying chaos. Genius? No. Evil? Yes. A man, not a myth. Lessons bite. Power consolidates fast, hate simmers quiet. Democracy's a garden needing guard, propaganda's dissected today, from tweets to TV. Hitler's echo screams, vigilance or ruin. What's his loudest warning now? Share below. That's Chapter 10, End, Echo, Enigma. Hitler's Reich fell, but its shadow lingers, a mirror and a map. Thanks for joining this audiobook journey. Like, subscribe, share your what-ifs below. History's ours to learn, not repeat.